All right, so I'm Sam Roundy with Testeract. We have about 40 employees at our company, and we are located everywhere, all across the U.S. So we have employees in 6 or 7 different states now, and but mostly based in Utah. And so I've been doing test and measurement about 20 years, and I focus heavily on automated test frameworks. That's why I'm such a big test stand nerd. But this is one of the things that we're doing with our customers, and I don't want it to be too markety. So if it gets too markety, just throw stuff at me. I want it to be more about like how you can take something back away from this and help your team at the very least, right? And so this is something that we're getting a lot of traction with, and our customers are really interested in, is like, because really test engineering, and we'll talk about this more, is more than just LabVIEW and test and the tools we use. It's a bigger picture than that. It's how do we organize ourselves, and how do we do that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
I'm Alex. I have 20 months of industry experience. Sam's dragged me out here to help tell the story of learning and this process. So I probably know a lot less than most of you, but you guys all probably have the curse of knowledge that I don't have. So I get to tell you some of the obvious things that you might not see. So that's why I'm here, to help support that, to represent your new entry-level engineers that are new to this world. So.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. This kind of agenda, we're going to look at the overview of kind of how to build a world-class team. We're going to talk about Test Team Builder, and then we're going to talk about NI Center of Excellence, or we were going to talk about it. And then we'll talk about some of the disciplines that are part of that Test Team Builder, and then we'll talk about the process, and then the value that it can add to your organization to follow some of the rules, you know. So, and by the way, a couple housekeeping things. Feel free to ask any questions at any point. You know, just raise your hand. If we see you, we'll call on you. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to understand what it is a test engineer is and what they do, right? And it's really, really nebulous. We're in such a unique industry, because you go to the aerospace and defense, you know, category or industry. Test engineers are a completely different breed of people than when you go to semiconductor, and then when you go to other industries, they're completely different, right? And what I found is that test engineers are a unique breed of engineer, because you need a bunch of degrees to do what we do. Every day we deal with a lot of different problems. I mean, you need a computer engineering degree. That's the best one, by the way. Mostly because it's mine. Actually, let's do a poll. How many of you have a computer engineering degree? CS. EE.
Oh.
Expected. 48% of test engineers have an EE degree. What about physics? That's one that's common. And they actually make really good test engineers, by the way. Mechanical engineering. Okay. What else we got? Data science type engineer, you know? That kind of goes along with CS. What am I missing here?
Well, you could ask them. Any others?
Yeah, any others? Curious. What?
Linguistics.
Linguistics.
That's cool.
Oh, so tech writer, right? He's our tech writer. Everybody get their documentation. Right? So it's a lot of crap that we have to do and learn and know to do the job properly. And really, at the end of the day, we make 3 products. If you just bring it down and try and simplify it, which is really hard to do, you take requirements, and hopefully those go through the test team, and they come out as software, hardware, and test procedures or documentation. Thank you. And ultimately, this comes out as a test station, hopefully, right, with user manuals. That's the documentation, the test procedure part of it. And then you have your hardware and your software, right? That's ultimately what we do. Any other insights or questions on that before I move on? Yes.
All right. Just keep write in active voice, not passive voice. Things do things. Things don't just happen.
Okay. It's a journey that we take to turn those requirements into that, right? And there are a lot of roadblocks along the way. I mean, we deal with a lot of stuff. I mean, one day we're procuring parts, and that's a lot of time. That can be a huge time suck because we got to call vendors, we got to do research, and then we got to wait for parts, long lead times. We got to keep bugging them, and they're having manufacturing problems. And so that's one just roadblock that can get in our way. Politics. Everybody has to deal with politics. There's no way around that in our industry. We have to deal with it. Test tools. We got to find lab space. We got test fixtures we got to make, implementation. And a lot of things can go wrong. Cables. It's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need to make cables. I got to go design the cables. I got to have somebody solder them, all that stuff. It's a long process. And did you have anything to add?
Yeah, integration. It's a lot harder than you think the first time. Way harder.
Yeah, it really is. Integrate. It's always the 80-20 rule, right? You're like, we're 80% done, but we haven't started integration yet. That's only 20%.
I was there. I was like,
that's really 80%, right? So
it's shipping tomorrow, Sam. Have you tested it? Nah,
it'll work. Vacation. That's a big one that gets in the way of deadlines, right? A lot. And not to mention attrition. How many of you have been like right there with a project and then team members like, hey, I got a job over here, right? So did you have a question or? Yeah, we see this kind of thing in our industry. So how do we deal with these things? And how do we, ultimately our goal is to make that path as short as possible and remove as many of those roadblocks as possible, right? Any
Yes.
questions or thoughts, right? Any questions or comments on that or thoughts?
Do you get requirements?
That is awesome because, if we go back, that's changing requirements, right? Even to your point, sometimes we have to go to specs and whatever to get those requirements, right? We just have to make them up sometimes, right? Just don't tell anyone. Awesome. Any other comments? I love it. All right. So we have this test team builder that we do with our customers. It's focused on how to run a world-class test team. We have 6 disciplines. We'll talk about those. And that we've broken all of those. We've looked at the whole path through there, and we've broken those kind of down into 6 disciplines. And then those are broken down into proficiencies, which we'll talk about as well. And we don't really have a set solution for this. This is more just we have an assessment that we do. We sit down, we assess those disciplines. We say, here's where you are relative to what we're seeing in the industry. And here's how good you're doing with these kinds of things. For example, if you're not doing source code control, you're probably going to get a low score there. And if you're doing great with it, you'll probably get a high score there. And really this assessment is just so that you can see where you are. If you don't know where you are, it's hard to tell what your vision should be, right? And that's the next step, is a strategized piece. I call it putting together a charter, or if you want a constitution for your team. And this is like where we want to be. You're not going to get there tomorrow. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take some time. And then that act is how you act on that strategy. And then the maintain is keeping up with industry standards, right? I will speak for Nancy because we are a center of excellence as well. These two go hand in hand in that the center of excellence focuses on how to employ great software practices. How many of you have gone through the NI Center of Excellence or are familiar with it, understand it? I know, Joe, your team's a Center of Excellence. Chris, DMC, are they Center of Excellence? Awesome. And it's a great program for like, hey, here's how you do LabVIEW, or test stand. They don't like to push test stand, but I will for them. And ultimately, the end result of that is here's the certifications, here's what you need to be, right? But ours is, that can be a solution to what our program has to offer, right? So enough about that. That's the marketing crap. All right. This is Nancy's slide. But ultimately, this is the kind of the categories that you go through. This green one is your technical leadership one. The blue one's your engagement in community learning. That's attending NI Connect and things like that. And if you do internal user groups and things like that. The purple one up there, and this is all on the website, on NI Connect's website. or NI's website.
On NI.com. Something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Just Google it. And then the software practices right up at the top. So any questions on this that I can try and answer? There is not a magic pill out there, just to let you all know. There's not a magic pill. It's a process. It's going to take time. It's something that you have to be disciplined about. It's something that you have to push. And the problem with us as test engineers is we are at the end of the food chain, the end of the line, and freaking R&D used all of the budget and all of the time. And so we've got negative 2 weeks to get it done and negative $1 million, right? So go, right? And so it's really hard to be disciplined when you're under fire like that. But I promise you, if you push for that and if you do that, there will be value. You want to be a proactive team, not a reactive team. Awesome. Good job, Nancy. Okay. So let's talk about this test team builder thing that we do. I've already kind of talked about the process, so I don't need to go too much into that. But these are the 6 disciplines that we've kind of broken it down into, and we're going to talk about each one of these in detail. Ultimately, these are the things that we've identified as these are things that you need to focus on to do a good job as a test engineering team. So let's dive right into it. Oh, actually, before we dive right into it, we will. Here's the proficiency. So we've taken these 6 categories, these 6 disciplines, and we said here are the proficiencies, which are smaller, bite-sized kind of excellences that you can focus on. For example, individual growth. What does a career path on your organization look like for a test engineer? How does a test engineer feel valued and grow? If you don't do that, you're going to have high attrition rates. And attrition costs a lot of money. I know they don't think it does because there's other organizations involved in that attrition, the HR and hiring and all that. But you don't see the dollar value there, not to mention the time lost on projects and things like that. And so you need to really invest in your engineers and give them a good path forward. They'll leave your company if they don't feel like they're growing, right? And we'll talk about that later as well. But that's kind of what the proficiencies are. So any questions on this before I move on?
Sam, let's dive right in.
Yeah, let's dive right in.
Or let's dive.
Oh, question.
The only thing that's on is companies that have a great career path growth, how as a lower in the food chain you can kind of talk to that could be.
So the question was, any tips on how to, if your company doesn't offer a good, I'm assuming you're not a manager? Yeah, so really it's up to the manager to provide that. But the question was, how does if you're stuck in an org that doesn't give you that career path, what do you do, right? There's a lot of jobs out there. Not gonna lie, a lot. I did a search the other day for LabVIEW developers on LinkedIn, and I think 68,000 or something. It was a lot. No, I'm totally kidding. You gotta appeal to the gods, right? I mean, you gotta go and market it and say, hey, look, people are gonna get bored. We'll talk about the flow zone in a minute, but hopefully that will answer more of your question. But it really is. You got to kind of make that, right? I'm assuming most companies have different levels of engineers, and that's kind of a career path, but it's not true to what a test engineer does, right? And how we can grow as test engineers. Also, talking your management into coming to events like this and learning, that's going to grow. Certifications, that's a great way to grow. What kind of certifications are out there, right? So, great question. Thank you. All right.
Operations. I get to introduce the topics. So, everyone, I'm assuming most of us have experience with a group project or school or whatever. I did that like in fall, and I was up all night because I was in firefighter mode. We didn't have any standards for how we did anything, right? That's one of the core disciplines.
Yeah.
Proficiencies. Proficiencies.
Operations is a discipline.
Yep. So that these are the symptoms as they relate. So firefighting mode is we didn't have standards, right? And I'm sure you can see a lot of these through your organizations, processes, templates, procedures, rules of engagement. You've got to have all of them. And they are an actual contract, so that means they need to be written down, right? If they're not viewable or not seeable by people in your who need to see it, right? By the parties involved, it doesn't do you any good, right? Everyone has encountered the secret rules of society. Write them down, right?
Yeah, so operations really is how you define the governance of your team, right? It's your process, your standards, things like that, like you said. And I would say sometimes I see a lot of teams organized and they've been working together for years. They just know how each other operate. That's great. But I still would write it down.
Write it down.
It's just better to have it. I always used to argue whoever has the first document wins. And because that becomes the standard, right? I hear some laughs, and it's true sometimes in DoD, right? So that's operations. Nancy was going to say, I love picking on her. She was going to say, use templates wherever you can. So if you have, like a style guide or a peer review document that you need to do, you templatize as much as possible. Reduce that work. Remember, we're trying to shorten that journey, shorten that path. If I don't have to start from scratch every time I write a document, that's the best, right? Especially with documentation. We hate that.
How do you balance that with continuous improvement?
Your continuous improvement, what do you mean?
So I mean, your standard's going to change as newer, more awesome things.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So,
Those are living documents, right? So you have to be disciplined enough to go back and edit them and update them. My background is I worked at L3 Harris for a while, and we had living policies, right? And we had people who owned those policies, gatekeepers of those policies, and that person was responsible for making sure that those were up to date and those were edited and cleaned up. And that's also a good thing that, hey, people get responsibility. Yeah, it's policy editing, but it's something that people can own and feel like they're part of the team with. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question. This is an example of our process at Testeract. This is kind of the big thing for us is we want everyone to understand how we operate. And so we put this together so that any of our engineers know, hey, we're in the alpha integration phase or the beta integration phase, and this is what happens during that phase. We have milestones. We have inputs to those phases, outputs of those phases, what's expected. We have roles identified to help with those phases. And then at the bottom here, we have something called a green out. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's who's ultimately responsible for that phase, right?
This is how we get our requirements. So we force that.
We do really kind of force it through here, because in these first phases, that's where we have to make sure that those requirements are ready to go before we hit the other phases, right? We use the terms PDR and CDR. They're used otherwise in DoD, but we use them in here as preliminary design review and critical design review.
I'm so ready. I'm ready this time. Organization. Thank you, everyone. Very similar to operations, but this is the who, right? Not the how, the who. So this is your defined roles, your defined responsibilities, your defined structure, and your defined culture. We have a culture of positivity and fun at our work, which is why I'm here. I get a cup.
Keeps trying to talk me into buying an ice cream machine.
One day we'll get it. We're so close. Okay, but culture for me is really important. I've had the opportunity to work for very large organizations. I worked for Microsoft Stores, and they were really, really good at defining roles, and they were really, really good at keeping you in your roles. And I like the culture at Testeract because I'm allowed to branch out. There's still the gatekeepers of those roles, but I'm allowed to experiment and try new things, right? Hey, Sam, I'd like to try to write an architecture document for this. He's the one that signs off on it. It's still his responsibility, but I get the opportunity to grow. That's really important for me in my culture, and I think that's what makes a good test engineer, someone who wants to try to learn all these new disciplines because of all those roadblocks.
Yeah, it's really hard sometimes just to let people loose without some kind of supervision
Especially
or
me.
oversight, especially newer engineers who are learning the trade, right? And so that's why they have to have those roles, right? And Nancy was going to talk about the team technical lead and all of these things. Questions on that? All right, good. So I don't like slides with a lot of words. So this is what we call a RACI or a dot chart. I remember I showed you on our process that dot, that green dot. There's 3 dots that we have. There's a red dot. They have the veto power. There's a green dot. They're the decision maker. And then there's the blue dot, which is a required input. There's a couple reasons why we do this. The first one is we want to speed up decision making. There's nothing that can kill an organization faster than slow decision making. Now, you may make a few wrong ones. That's okay. That's kind of the SpaceX. If anyone hears from SpaceX, I apologize. But that's their model, right? Make quick decisions and just go. And then if you make a wrong one, that's okay. We'll fix it, right? This also empowers people. That's another reason that this exists. I can't stand when I see a test org and nobody on there can make a decision. They all have to have a big committee. They all get in a room, 20 engineers. That costs thousands and thousands of dollars. They don't realize that because we just work for the man, you know. But they get in the room and 20 meetings later, they still haven't even really decided anything. And what they do come up with sometimes is kludgy, because I'm not saying they're getting good input, but there's just nobody really driving it. And so what this allows us to do is every decision you put down in your or every major kind of task or responsibility, you put down here on the left, and then you put the roles here, and then you kind of assign dots. And so you can only ever have 1 red dot and 1 green dot per responsibility or decision. And you can have as many blue dots as are needed, as little as needed, right? And so whenever, for example, the project lead, who is the green dot for holding reviews, wants to have a review, they have to include the engineers who are responsible, and then the manager only gets involved when any of the blue dots have significant dissent. So they're like, hey, this green dot's gone off the rails. We need to talk, right? So they'll go back and say, hey, red dot, we need some intervention here from higher up. So can you step in a little bit? And this is really, really powerful, because what it does is it puts in front of everybody on your team, hey, Joe's responsibility is this. You know, we're trusting him as the person to make these decisions. And if there's significant dissent, we can talk, but we're going to let him roll with it and just go. And it's really powerful, and it just speeds up your team. It just creates more efficiency. Anybody ever use a RACI chart or a dot chart? Couple people.
I love it though.
You love
I
it.
haven't used it, but I love it.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. So, and it really does make people feel like they're included because it's empowering. You want everyone to have kind of a green dot role somewhere, and so it empowers them.
The third discipline, project management, the thing that I am the worst at in the whole world. If you got to have tools.
That's not good marketing.
Hold on. I'm going somewhere.
Okay.
Trust. Budget, time, resources, scope.
It is one of our core values.
You know what's really helped me become better at this? Having a project manager. Having someone who has a defined role to help me do this task. This is something that has helped me a lot learn how to do this as an engineer. This is not something that I learned in school. I just learned to stay up until midnight every night the week before it's due.
Night.
Yep. So, yeah, and scope for me, without a project manager, scope just starts going off the rails because I'm an engineer and I want to do everything the rightest way and eliminate everything. At a certain point, you're gonna run through your budget.
Question, audience poll here, informal. How many of you guys and gals have a 90% or better project on-time delivery? I don't see a single hand. I saw somebody twitch a finger, but no hands. 80%. 60? I feel like an auctioneer up here. Who'll give me 50. Now 40, now 40, now 40. All right. So we can see without project management, which is really about these things, budget, time, resources, scope, that's what project management is focusing on. And I will throw one tidbit of a tip out there. Never let the lead engineer be the project manager.
It's a bad idea.
Yes, I said cheering. Good. That's a good idea, I guess. The problem is it's a fox guard in the hen house, right? And it just causes a lot of issues. But if you have somebody holding them accountable and responsible, a third party, another individual, it's much better. We found it to be much better.
Yes.
So, Nancy was going to say find the business value. I don't know what she was going to talk about there, but find business value. What's that? Question.
Hi. So I had a question about the project management. So that's something our team is working on right now, and we are getting members in other countries and like really expanding the team at a large growth rate. So we all are identifying that project management is an important thing, but we also, I don't think are going to get a project manager like role for, you know, like that's not going to be something our company pays for.
That's better than get rid of an engineer and hire a project manager.
I guess so. Yeah. So that's my question: is how do you, like, do you kind of designate one person to be the project manager for everything, or do you say like divide it into, you know, you're project manager for this and this, and like how do you do that?
That's a great question. So the question is, for the record, how do you designate a project manager if your organization can't afford one, a designated project manager, right? It's just something we can't go hire a dedicated project manager. We need, but we still want to follow that rule, right? Yeah, I would say back to the dot chart, you have a dot on there that's a project manager type dot, and sometimes you're wearing that hat, but you're also an engineer on a different project, but then you're project managing this one over there. And so just have them wear that hat during that project. And if you can, have them train up. There's PMP is a good project management, certification that people can go get. And if you can't, have them train on how to do project management, and so that they can, it's really just a political game of keeping people on track and staying under budget and all of that stuff. But I hope that's helpful. That's what I would do if I were in your situation.
I would find engineers that are good at that.
Yeah, I think that's the issue right now is like no one really wants to take that responsibility.
Yeah, it's hard.
Like, and I don't know if I'm, who's going to make that decision.
Well, congratulations. That's very exciting for you.
Yeah. No, it's just a role that somebody has to do. I mean, we all have to do things we don't like, but that's why we get paid decent money, better than the literature, guys, it's because we have to deal with hard stuff, right? So, tools. Have a good project management tool. There's a lot out there. This is an actual project. I took this snapshot 2 or 3 weeks ago when I made these slides of an actual project we're working on. It's a database we're standing up for a customer. And so we have a Gantt chart looking thing. This is JIRA, if you're not familiar. We have a Gantt chart looking thing. We have some hazard things. I should look into those. But it shows, kind of the big, we call them epics, right? If you're familiar. And then down here, this is called a Kanban board, which allows us to move those tasks through and assign tasks. And we break those down into smaller chunks. We try to keep those 2-week sprints. That's our goal is everything in 2-week sprints. We do kind of a hybrid waterfall agile thing where the entire process is waterfall, but when we get into that development phase, we do agile. We do 2-week sprints and we keep those going. And that's what the project manager, that's their cadence generally. Sometimes they do 1 week depending on the project. But that during those sprints, they assign a bunch of these tasks to the different engineers. They have 2 weeks to complete them, and that's when they can hold them accountable. Hey, you said you were going to add the power supply to the code. You had 2 weeks to do it. You got nothing to show. What's going on, man? Oh, you were in the bathroom 4 hours a day. What's going on? So That's when you can, as a project manager, we actually had that happen at a company. As a manager, you can hold people accountable, right? And you hit those deadlines, you know. So questions, yeah.
How do you instill that accountability?
What do you mean instill? Like,
What do you?
I found public shaming is the best, but that doesn't always work with everyone. So it's really just, it's a discussion, right? It's like, hey, and you have to document those patterns. But this is like a self-documenting tool, right? So you can see it and you can say, Joe, I'm sorry if anyone's named Joe. I'm not picking on any sorry, Joe Helms. He's a good buddy of mine. So it's like, you've been assigned this task for 4 sprints in a row. This is a 40-hour task for a normal engineer. What's going on? Let's sit down and talk. You have that talk to turn around, see what's really going on. You know, maybe their cat died. I don't know. Like, so, and as a manager, hopefully managers are doing their job and they're aware of this and they can sit down and have those conversations with the engineers and say, look, everyone else is getting their tasks done. We've assigned you these. Is it a skill issue? Maybe they don't understand LabVIEW. Is it I don't know. You got to get to the root cause of it, right? Yeah, comment.
Yeah, and so along those lines, one of the things that I like doing when assigning the task is asking the permission of the person to whom I'm assigning the task to. Do you agree? Like,
Yeah.
All right, and it's like so up front, I need your buy-in. Now, in retrospect, you can say maybe the 2 weeks has expired. They didn't get the task done. You know, we have an encouraging conversation. I know you wanted to be able to do this. What can I do such that we don't have this happen again?
Yeah. So the comment was, create that agreement up front with the engineer. Create a little contract, a verbal contract, or even written. You agree to this task, you know. Now, one thing I will say, as test engineers, we call it walk-up work. Anybody ever have their sprints and they're all happy and glorious, and then all of a sudden something goes down on the floor and there goes a day and a half, right? Trying to find the right cable or whatever. You got to account for that in there. We found almost 60%, in certain cases, 60% of their time should be spent on this and 40% on walk-up work, depending on how good the code on the floor was, right? So you got to be cautious of that, right? So
I just wanted to add, I think for me, having trust makes me want to execute better because then I feel guilty and shame, right? But like if you give me responsibility, I think we all want to execute on that, right? We have that pride. And so as long as it's not just like giving terrible tasks, right? Like you're going to have to execute on terrible tasks every once in a while, right? But giving something that someone wants to do every once in a while is going to help encourage them to continue working.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good manager, a good project manager will line those resources with the tasks that they're excited about, right? I mean, we're all giving our documentation stuff to him. He's excited about it. He's literature stuff.
It's not why I'm here.
You brought it on yourself.
Software.
How we time check? Okay, we're good. We got to hurry.
It's 11:06. The fourth discipline is software. So this is your framework. This is your DevOps, development model, deployment, maintenance. I think for me, Testeract has a very standard framework that we use. Using that framework has helped me execute quickly and better and learn a whole bunch very efficiently without a lot of the pain, right? Like I get to go, hey, someone in my organization, do we have something? Oh yeah, here it is. This is how you do it. This is why, yada, yada, yada. And so defining all of that code, maximizing code reuse in your framework is a big deal.
Yeah, I feel like us LabVIEW developers, and I'm not saying everyone here is LabVIEW developers, but you talk to like the Sam Taggarts, the Allens, the Chris's, the LabVIEW guys, they have a pretty good grasp on the software side of things, right? And to Alex's point, the framework, well, I'll talk for Nancy for a second. This is just a snippet of some of the stuff that she goes through for the Center of Excellence, right? And this is how she kind of grades organizations to earn that Center of Excellence. And so you can see in here, one of those is how do they gather the requirements for the software? You know, what's the process for developing the software and things like that, right? I can't stress, even you have your big process, but you should also have a development model, which is kind of how you do your software. There's a ton of development models. There's Agile, there's the V model, you guys have probably studied them in school, but there's a lot of them out there, right? So this is kind of a high level snapshot of our framework. Like Alex said, having a framework can be really powerful, a standard thing.
You can build tooling.
Our framework's built with a bunch of packages. I know everyone hates PPLs. We love them. We found a really great way to use them. But basically, we have how. You walk up to any test station. You say, oh, I've got this power supply. I've got this, spectrum analyzer, this signal generator. Grab those pieces, just pull them in, put them on the machine. Okay, I need to create 2 or 3 more HAL items. Okay, I'm going to do my scripting, my automated test engine. We use TestAnd mostly for that, although we have worked in homebrewed test executives with our framework. And you just grab these pieces that are already made, and if the pieces don't exist, you create them. An example of this is we have a customer out in California testing space components, RF space components, and they wanted us to fully automate their test system. They were doing 6U, so six dots at once, in a thermal vac chamber, and they had about 20 pieces of instrumentation on there, maybe. And we completed that in less than a month, fully automated. Like they went from nothing to fully automated in a month by just using pieces of this framework that were already there. So I would say get a framework, and whatever that looks like. And that's what NI's been pushing this week is standards. And I think that's what they're talking about is how do we share information within our organization to standardize, right? So awesome. Okay.
Discipline 5, hardware. Yeah, I hear Snickers every once in a while. Okay, so this is your device under test, understanding that. Your test system, calibration, procurement, test fixtures, maintenance, all that stuff. All the stuff that I, as a computer engineer, through COVID, didn't get to do hands-on stuff with. So I got to learn a lot on the job with these. And I would also, if you have new entry level engineers, don't make assumptions that they know all of this stuff. I remember when Sam was like, yeah, the DUT. And I was like, the DUT? So
he thought I was stuttering.
Yeah, I thought he was saying something else. I think for me, the biggest skill that I've learned as it relates to hardware is being able to read data sheets. That's a real skill that I've needed to learn. And that's something that I think is glossed over a lot by technical people because you know how to read a data sheet already. So you haven't thought about that.
Yeah, not just the data sheet, but the programmer guide.
Oh,
right?
yeah, and the programmer guide and all that stuff.
The right Skippy commands and all that, especially when we're adding that to our HAL.
Yep.
Because they're not always in IDNet, so we got to make them, right? So one thing that I've found works a lot, if you have a larger organization, you have a lot of test stations you have to maintain and support. I worked on a company, we were maintaining 500 test stations, unique test stations. Is come up with a standard equipment list. It's always interesting to me when an engineer just shows up with a different model because the Rhodian Shorts guy took him to lunch, right? So come up with a standard list. This is a good idea. Write it down. Make that the team standard. Put it out in front of the team and maybe vote on it or whatever. Have the green dot, choose it. But basically you say, here's our standard power supplies. If you need something that does this, you choose these ones. These are the models we choose. These are alternatives if you need them. The value of doing this is you can have a lot of spares, which is pretty good, right? Because if something goes down or out for Cal, you can just throw a new one in. The other advantage is you have more buying power because you can go to the vendors and you can say, hey, look, we buy hundreds of these from you because we have them on all our benches. We want to lower cost on those, right? And there's a lot of advantages to doing this. Common software libraries. That's kind of back to Nancy's slide of, what hardware you choose drives that. That company that I was telling you about, now they're like, okay, now we won't need you to go automate this bench. Well, somebody chose different spectrum analyzer and a different power meter. Like, okay, well, we got to go write the code for that. And like, hold on. We rent this stuff. So we're going to return this ones and go rent the ones we already have the software for because that'll save us some money. Great.
The whole burst into hardware and software.
This is my favorite one, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
Individual growth?
Yeah.
The opportunity to throw your intern in front of a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, this is growth.
Yeah, it's great for me. Growth. This is your career path, professional development, community involvement, certifications, all that stuff. I think for me, being able to grow is really important. It's part of your culture. It helps you just be better, right? And it helps motivate your individuals that are on your team.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite quotes. Back in 2010, when I worked at L3 Harris, we had this thing we secretly called the Dance of the Lemons. But basically, all of these people showed up on the software team that weren't really skilled because they'd heard the word LabVIEW, right? So we have 44 people on our team, and we had to train them, or we had to do something because we couldn't assign them tasks because they weren't skilled for it. And I went to the manager, I said, hey, let's do this program. Let's train people. Let's put out this training thing. He's like, yeah, but then they're going to have a good resume. If we give them certifications, they're going to go find. I'm like, that's on us. We got to create an environment where they want to thrive and where they want to be here, right? And then I found this quote from Richard Branson. He's the founder of Virgin, right? The only thing worse than training someone and having them leave is to not train them and have them stay, right? So use that with your manager. So I just ask about talking their manager into things. Yeah, this is a great quote, right? And you know what we found? It actually led to less attrition because people felt like we were investing in them. They're like, I want to be here because they're going to grow me as an individual. I don't want to leave. I mean, you know, they don't hate it as much. As much, not as. Nancy was going to talk about some onboarding stuff, I believe. It says onboarding right there. All right. This is what I call the flow zone. Anybody seen this chart before?
I have.
This was shown to me and it opened my eyes, right? Like sometimes in the test engineering org, we get this new guy right out of school and we say, okay, we want you to go solve, you know, the whatever omega problem or some crazy thing. And they're just not equipped and they're super underskilled and they get too overwhelmed and they feel like, boy, test engineering sucks. I don't like this. I want to go do something else. By the way, 48%, was it 40? No, it's like 48 or 50%. I was reading this the other day. Of people who go into the hardware test engineering role within 2 years have found a different job or are out of engineering altogether. So and usually a different job, meaning they're not in test and measurement engineering anymore, some other kind of engineering. And I think it has to do with some of this, like they're either too overwhelmed. And then the other problem you can have on the other end is you have a guy who's been at your company 30, 40 years and he's bored, right? Because he's done it all. But you got to keep him you got to keep him challenged. Invite them to speak with you at NI Connect, right? That'll challenge them. And just keep them in that flow zone. That's where they're happy. That's where people are happy. They don't feel too overwhelmed. They feel like they're still growing. They feel like they're still being empowered. And set up your career paths, your trainings, your certifications, so that you can keep people in those flow zones. So good. So the test team builder, that's the program we talked about. I talked about the four processes. We go through all of those disciplines, all the strategies, and we have questions, or all those proficiencies. We have questions. We say, how are you guys doing with, for example, oops, go back. Sorry. Sneak peek. How are you doing with community involvement? You know, do you send your guys to events, community events, not just NI Connect, not just NI events, but other events? There's tons of events out there for test engineers. And how involved are you in those events? If you don't keep up with the industry, you're going to fall behind. You're going to be left in the dust. You're going to have legacy ideas. And your systems are just going to get out of date, right? So there's a lot there. Again, this is kind of the process for the Center of Excellence. This is the process for Test Team Builder. And the Center of Excellence is actually, you know, can be, like I said, one of the solutions to Test Team Builder. And Test Team Builder really can help shorten this path, because really what you're doing is you're getting organized, you're getting disciplined, you're creating that culture, right? And this is a process that the teams themselves come up with. We're not going to dictate you have to use our framework, or you have to use LabVIEW, or you have to use this. We're not about that with this program. What it is more of, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. What are your needs? Everyone has different needs. They're in different industries. They're in different, different restrictions put on them by their company, right? They have to play within those rules. And so that's what this is about, is finding that path for your team. What's the best path? And then organizing and getting disciplined with those disciplines. Questions? Yes.
You said you worked for L3. Did you guys have some sort of DUT engineer to test engineer matrix?
So the question is, do we have a DUT engineer and a
To a test engineer.
Like a
So like two DUT engineers, you'd have one test engineer, or is there any sort of flow to that? So when we're developing hardware, we have 7 guys developing hardware.
You're talking about on the R&D side?
Correct.
Okay.
So then how many test engineers would you need for?
So your question is, how many test engineers per
R&D.
R&D engineers? Depends on how smart they are, right? So I'm not totally kidding, but serious. So, I mean, I don't know. It depends on how complex the DUT is, right? And what kind of things they need to build on the test engineering side. Where I was at L3 Harris was in Salt Lake City. We had 140 test engineers. There was 3,500 people at the company. I mean, 90% of them were engineers. And so we had to keep up with all of them. We were just on the production side. We weren't doing design verification testing. The system engineers did those. And I don't even know the ratios over there of system engineer to design guys. But even the design guys were broken into multiple orgs, right? Because they had the FPGA guys, the software guys, the PCB guys, the CCAs they call them, and a bunch of different groups contributing to this. So at any time could be 100 R&D engineers were touching the product or building the product, right? So I don't know. It just depends. Any thoughts on that? I don't think there's a golden, here's what it should be. But anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think having documentation, or it depends on how mature you are in that process, right? Are you handing off a document of requirements that need to be executed to the test engineer? Or do they need to figure out how the DUT works? Is there no manual, like that kind of stuff? Or
are they working side by side with the engineers, right? From day one. I mean, they should, because you want to build for test, but yeah. I wish I had a better answer for you.
You only need one Sam.
I wouldn't know. I'm not good with hardware. I will put that out there right now. I will say this. If you employ a lot of these practices, you should need less engineers. And that's one of the things. If you can get more efficient as a test engineering org, you should have more throughput, which should mean you need less resources, right? Hopefully. I don't know.
Yeah, we just have 2 engineers, so it's really hard to implement.
How many R&D guys are you supporting?
Probably 10, 15 hardware.
Yeah, that sounds about right in my mind. I mean, how many products does your company make?
Probably about 35, 40.
Yeah, that seems about right. The one thing though that happens sometimes is say we have 2 engineers and we're keeping up with the new products coming. Eventually, you can't keep up with all the new stuff coming down because you're still maintaining all the legacy stuff. And that's taking a lot of your bandwidth too, right? And so you have to calculate that in somehow of, we're spending 40, so you track the numbers, right? How much time are you spending on the floor maintaining old stuff? How much time are you spending on the new stuff? And if you can grab those numbers, data's king, right? If you can take that data to management or whoever, you can justify, look, we've got, 500 hours of work, but per month, and we've only got 2 guys. We need another guy. Right?
I think it's just hard to implement a project management style with 2 engineers.
Yeah, but you can find what works for you, right? So maybe your process is pretty simple. It's like, go do your thing, you know? I don't know.
It's quite the process.
That's a terrible
Very well
process. I
thought
don't
out.
recommend that, but I don't know.
The other thing that really matters is the level of rigor in like qualifying test equipment. Because
Yeah.
if you're just doing a bunch of development stuff and like it doesn't need to last for a really long time and have like, you know, like medical level of rigor, like
Yeah.
that's one thing. I feel like a lot of times we underestimate the amount of like paperwork and documentation that goes in for like high rigor systems, and that's usually where test equipment kind of gets understaffed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially in medical, where we have a lot of medical customers, and that qual process can take the FDA. They're super picky, right? Take more than the time it took to develop the test. So,
So
All right.
how many concurrent or parallel projects would you say a test engineer should be working on?
I think it depends on
Skill.
yeah, well, skill, but like how you're organized too, right? Sometimes, so we have a guy.
Maybe poorly.
Okay, very poorly. Yeah, one project, half a project. Yeah, it depends on how big your projects are too, right? And how involved they are. Because sometimes we sit around waiting for hardware or a golden dot we can test with or something like that, and so then we have time to work on another project, right? So you can pipeline things.
Maybe a follow-up to that, if you're in a sprint, do you black out meetings for future planning for upcoming projects or parallel projects?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you should have those numbers, right? It's like, look, in this 80-hour sprint, which is 2 weeks, I'm only really going to dedicate 40 of my hours to this project. So give me a 40-hour task, because those other 40 hours are spent walk-up work, corporate trainings, heaven forbid, and then like other things that you might, like you said, you know, proposals or whatever for new projects, right? So great comment. Thank you. Hopefully it leads to these things: increased retention, morale, deadlines achieved, all of those things. And if you're in a siloed organization and you want to take a vacation, it's really hard, right? Having this kind of stuff can help with, which increases morale, right? Now you can go on vacation because you know that other people can support your stuff. They can maintain your stuff because you followed a similar process and written similar code. I think we've kind of beat that to death. Yes.
I have a question. Do you have any advice for going from a one-person team to like building a team? Like, what are the good first steps? Like, what do you look for first? Like, which direction to expand?
So really, you have to look at: are you expecting to grow like to 10 people overnight? What's that growth rate look like, right? And so I think setting up some of those governing documents and other things ahead of time can help, because as you onboard people onto your team, there's less resistance to that kind of adoption, because you're saying, look, this is how we do it. I'm a one-man show, but this is how we do it. And then as they come on board, they can do that. So.
Also, do you have any thoughts about bringing on contractors, how to integrate that as opposed to bringing people on as employees?
Yeah, I mean, if you've documented your stuff well and you're willing to do this with contractors, you know, spend a week or two or a couple of days, like, here's how we do things at our company. And this is how we do it. And as a contractor, we expect you to just be a part of the team and follow the same rules and governing things that we do. So, yeah, I hope that's a good answer, but yeah. Thanks, Sam.
I thought it was just real quick. So in terms of scale, whether you're going from one person to 100 or one person to 2,
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to say.
Here it is, the thesis statement: kill tribal knowledge.
Yes.
You write it down.
That's a very good point. Thanks, Chris.
And whatever system you use, I recommend Confluence.
The silver tsunami is real. If you don't know what the silver tsunami is, it's a bunch of test engineers with gray hair like me, silver hair, are getting ready to retire. And companies are feeling that impact. That tribal knowledge is walking out the door. Every retirement cake we eat, there goes some tribal knowledge, you know. So it's like, we gotta replace that, and we gotta get rid of the tribal knowledge. That's key. I just write it down, right? Chat GPT that stuff, right? So great comment. Thank you. Any other questions? Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I want an ice cream machine.